Hey everyone, welcome back to the Monday Movie Club. This week we are heading into a movie that is known as one of the cornerstones of modern anime, Akira. And here to talk with me about it is my good friend and my out of quarantine roommate, Daniel Ayoola. Daniel,
Hello. Hi,
welcome.
hi, hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being on. Daniel, I just like to start off by asking everybody how they're doing in quarantine. Like, are you staying
Hmm.
safe, sane, and healthy?
Yeah, we hanging in there, trying our best. Things are. I mean, I'm a pretty indoor person anyway, so this kind of situation is kind of it's not too different from the norm. But so we're not doing terrible. We're not doing terrible, I'd say.
That's good. That's good. You finding ways to pass the time.
Yeah, pretty much. Watching a lot of stuff, reading, playing video games.
Absolutely. The core three of quarantine activities.
Absolutely.
Um, Now, Daniel, before I open up to Akira, I like to ask all of my guests two movie questions non-relating to the movie they picked. The first one being if there's a movie that you have that is like the first one you remember in theaters.
I don't the early one of the earliest movie memories I have is I mean I think I must have been at least like I must have been at least like 6 or 7. I don't remember how old I was actually. Well, but that's like the biggest movie memory I have is going to see Ghost Rider for my birthday.
Ghost Rider.
Yeah, because I was a huge Ghost Rider fan in comics. So
Mhm.
when the first movie was coming out, I was super excited for it. But it was like the day before my birthday. We were going on like the day that was my birthday.
Mhm.
But I was in New Jersey with my cousins, and we ended up pulling an all-nighter the night before because we were just like spending time with each other, goofing off,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. And so what actually ended up happening was that we got to the movie theater and like I remember getting into like in the theater itself and sitting down, and then I remember being awake in the car. And basically, what my parents told me what happened was like as soon as like when we got into the movie theater, I fell asleep like standing on the counter as they were getting the tickets, and then I fell asleep as soon as the movie started, and I didn't wake up until like after I got into the car. So I actually didn't see the movie at all. I just
That is your first memory of like going to the theater to see a movie
yeah.
and conked out the whole time.
The whole
That's
time I
so
was
funny.
out.
The other question I like to ask people is if there's a movie from their childhood that stands above the rest as being a big influencer on either you or your taste in movies or both.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, it. Hmm. I'd go like two ways about it. I think one, like a big influence on like especially my early movie like tastes was kung fu movies because I grew up on kung fu movies, watching like Bruce Lee movies,
Mhm.
Chow Yun Fat movies, like Ip Man, all those kinds of things. I used to watch them all the time as a kid. So I mean, I still have like a really soft spot for kung fu movies, and like it's something that like yeah, that's pretty much what I would say. Not that like I like watch like kung fu movies every day now, but
Right,
still like I would still they still definitely have like a very special place in my heart.
right. Would you say that that there's any connection between that and uh, anime? Like, obviously, there are different formats, but I feel like there are
Mm-hmm.
certain things
No,
that
yeah,
are
yeah.
spiritually similar.
I would absolutely say so. I think that like I mean, for me, and also like I would say like for me, like my brother, my family, my cousins, those things are
Mhm.
kind of similar in that like we all like enjoyed like kung fu movies. We all enjoyed like action, like that kind of like stylish choreographed kind of thing. And I think a lot of like not like all anime, obviously, but a lot of anime, martial arts anime and stuff like that kind of have those same themes, that same idea of like training or like working towards like a goal and like all this like training sequence and then fighting itself. And I think that those things do kind of translate in a way. So I definitely think that there is a correlation, or at least like, they're definitely partnered in a sense.
Yeah. So kind of using that as a segue
Mm.
piece, the first question that I like to open up everyone with is why did you pick Akira? I have all my guests pick movies, and why did Akira come to you?
I mean, I was thinking about like what movie I wanted to do, I was like, I had like not like a fair amount of trouble, but like as I was thinking about it, I didn't have anything that really came to mind. I've seen Akira like a good number of times. Last time I saw it was probably like last summer, and like before then, the last time I saw it was probably when I was like younger, when I was like a teenager. But it's a movie that like I enjoy. I don't think it's not like my favorite movie, but it's still like it's a movie that is well known already as like a very influential movie. But I mean, I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about. I'm actually curious. Have you seen the movie before, or had you seen the movie before?
I had not seen the movie before. It's I'm, and people know this from my Red Line episode. I mentioned it. Anime. If there's anything in the nerd world that I don't know like anything about, it's anime. But Akira is one of the few that I have heard about and knew something of it.
Oh yeah.
I remember even when the movie Chronicle came out,
Yeah.
I read being like, "There's a lot in common here."
Yeah, no, yeah. The director of Chronicle actually said that he took some inspiration from Akira.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one really, while a lot of the things that I, have little things that don't land with me with anime, this one actually, I enjoyed the whole ride through. It was a weird ride. There were moments where I was like, "This is freaky."
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really enjoyed the whole thing through. Before we get into like spoilers though about the movie, do you want to give a quick like elevator pitch or like quick synopsis for people at home that might not have seen it yet and might be considering watching it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it takes place in 2019, very very close to where we are right now, surprisingly. It takes place in Japan. It takes place in Neo Tokyo. It's Neo Tokyo because in 1989, I believe it was, in 1989, there was a nuclear explosion, essentially. An explosion that took place in Tokyo, leveled the entire of Tokyo. They had to rebuild. They had to like build inside like the Tokyo Bay to like make Tokyo a city again. And the new city is full of like corruption, people like unemployment. There's a lot of anger about a tax reform that's happened in the country, and there's protests and anti-government situations happening. But the main characters are just a bunch of like 16-year-old high schoolers in like a remedial disciplinary school who have a biker gang. One of them runs into a very odd-looking child, and weird things start to happen from there. That's like the little dipping the toe in.
That's sort of like, all right, what you're going to get into before you hit the spoiler. But yeah, things escalate from there.
And it's just like a futuristic world.
Yeah, it's very because this movie was made in 1988, right?
Indeed.
And I found it astounding how similar this movie was to a lot of like big American 80s movies at the time. The teen gang like happening together. Like the main character being kind of a skirt chaser. And then, of course, like that supernatural escalation element to it. Had some like war games, some E.T., like a lot of other classic 80s.
Yeah. It's definitely the director of it. Oh, I wish I had his name on me. But the director of it is also he created the manga itself. He like drew it, and when they were coming to him about making the movie, he was like, I have to be the director. I have to have like the final say and all that. But he's talked about like how he had a lot of influence from Western media that he put into the movie as well, because he wanted it to be like he wanted to really get that nice grungy city feel in the movie. So you could definitely it feels very contemporary as a movie.
It does. And there's another weird thing that I thought about while watching this. It seems so funny to me that the 80s as a whole in America and outside America seemed really obsessed with the future, specifically like 30 years in the future, like 2015 to 2020. And then
Mhm.
between 2015 and 2020, we were really obsessed with the 80s.
Yeah,
Like
that's true. That's
mutual
true.
relationship.
Yeah.
Uh, there's one question that I really want your opinion on.
Okay.
Kind of going back to the idea that anime is something a little out of my wheelhouse of like fandom and nerd culture. But while I was searching the movie up on Hulu, two versions came up. There
Mm-hmm.
is the subtitle version and the
Yeah.
dubbed version. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that there's like a contention between people of
Mm-hmm.
subbed versus dubbed. And I was wondering, as somebody who does enjoy a lot of anime, if you
Mm-hmm.
have an opinion on is one of those two
Mm-hmm.
things truly higher or more accurate than the other, and why you feel that,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's even worthy of
Okay.
such an argument.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. So I'm gonna sit up in my chair a little bit, a little bit of no, but actually. I think that it's there are two kinds of schools of thoughts that I would like talk about. But I think for me, for me personally, I'm more of like a subtitle. I prefer subs than to dubs or to a dubbed show or movie.
Mhm.
And I think part of that is because of when I started to watch anime, because I've watched anime since I was like basically since I was a kid. And for people who like were anime fans very early in animes like worldwide like distribution, dubbing and subbing were kind of different than they are now. Because back then, things that came out in the US would usually like they come out like on VHS or
Mhm.
like later on DVD, and there would be no dubbed version at all, like because it wasn't like localized to the US. They just
Right.
brought it to the US. So if there was any way you could watch it in English, you would either have to watch it subbed, or what you would do is you would have a group of people who were big fans of the show. Some of them might speak Japanese, some of them might be learning, and they would dub or sub that show themselves. And that was when the big boom of fan dubbing and fan subbing became a thing. But the problem was that fan subbing was generally quality was like kind of generally guaranteed because you would just be it's just words. As long
Mhm.
as the person can like translate those words well, it's fine. But the problem with dubbing is that you also have to be a good actor apart from being able to just say the lines.
Yeah.
So especially back then, dubs were very notorious for being incredibly terrible, some to the point of being hilariously so. Like if you even have the time, if you look up a Golden Boy, it's a show that came out in the 90s, and its dub is infamous for being one of the craziest, silliest, and funniest things around. Another one is like there's a fairly old anime called Ghost Stories, which came out in the US. It was supposed to have a dub, but the company that was dubbing it like basically gave the people dubbing it no rules at all. So instead of actually translating it normally, what they did is they basically turned it into like a parody show where all the translations were wrong, the characters were raunchy and like aged up, and it came out officially like that,
Oh
and
my.
like it still exists now. So like back then, it was really like a wild west of just like translating. Nowadays, things are a lot more standardized. If you're getting a dub or a sub, either one, generally the quality is like pretty like guaranteed in both ways. So
Mhm.
nowadays, I don't really like discriminate that much. I still prefer subs because for me, it's the idea of like this is like the way that the people creating it intended it to be like heard. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Because like this thing is like based out of a specific culture, a specific people. So for me, I think of like taking it in the way that they did it. For me, I find more interesting and I find more compelling,
Mhm.
especially because there's sometimes when like some things don't translate as well into spoken English as well as they do in spoken Japanese. Because even then, the way that anime is written is not necessarily the way that like the actual language is spoken normally. So like if like you go to Japan and you speak like they do in an anime, they'll be like, this person is talking like a weird like 10-year-old, because anime Japanese is simplified anyway to make it
Mhm.
easier for children for like younger people to understand it. So it's more theatrical than normal speaking.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like it's its own thing. But whether you enjoy the dub or the sub, I honestly just enjoy the thing, and
Yeah.
that's and then we cool.
Nice. That's real. I did not know like any of that. That was that was fascinating. Like the the extent that I knew about like subbing versus dubbing was I knew of some of the like infamous changes that would happen to like
Hmm.
Pokemon movies or like
Oh yeah, yeah,
Goku,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
how they like turned Goku into Superman for a while because they were like,
Hmm.
that's what
Hmm.
Americans want. So this movie obviously has a lot of layers running through it to
Hmm.
pack
Hmm.
into 2 hours. I mean, there's even stuff in the background that is so important that they have to translate those signs and like have
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
pop
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, it's like I was picking up on some like post World War II like PTSD feelings,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
fears of
yep, yep,
nuclear war.
very much so.
There was like a lot of rage against like the imperialist nature of capitalism and
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm,
early foundations of body horror, like
mm-hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
like so much that I can't even begin to list all of them or put some of them into words. And I was just wondering, as somebody who has seen this movie at least a few times, does any particular theme or concept start to rise up above the others as like the main through line for you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it is. It's interesting. Talking about like there are a couple of the things you said, like the post-war consideration. Especially a lot of early anime, is actually kind of directly out of post-war
Mm-hmm.
Japan and specifically speaks to post-war Japan, like
Yeah.
Gundam, mecha anime, like the really early anime, like Astro Boy or Mighty Atom, as it was called in Japan, were like specifically supposed to be like, hey, like technology has caused destruction, like the bombs that were dropped on our countries.
Yeah.
But we can take back technology and turn it into something good by putting it in this light. And by taking, and like Godzilla itself being like a
Yeah.
direct, nuclear
One of the
war.
most
Like it's like, yeah,
famous bomb allegories.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and that's like definitely present in here. It's present in like things that come out later, like Evangelion, which is like also a lot about like war and how to deal with technology in general. I think that this movie, I mean, talking about like this whole uh, touching on something that like humanity perhaps should not touch on. I think that's an interesting thing. That's a more metaphysical thing that it's dealing with. But talking about like the actual like government and the society that the show itself is steeped, the movie itself is steeped in, is something that I always found really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Neo Tokyo and like the relationship with like the colonel in the military and
Yeah.
with it ending in a coup and all these people, like the people on the street, the religious people on the street, and the people rioting. Oh, it's interesting to see how much those themes or ideas of like that anti-government, anti-corruption, or just like to see the way that I believe the colonel talks about the city they're in. He calls it like overripe in a
Yeah, he
sense
does.
that
Yeah.
it's like kind of it's been here, like they're not looking forward to progress anymore. It's just like things are just here, and now people are just kind of festering in this hedonism and this kind of intake, and they've gotten tired. The like city needs a new change. I think it's interesting to see like the trajectory that the movie is trying to like paint of this place that
Mhm.
has been like destroyed and has now been rebuilt and like reconstruction, and how like now that the building is done, like nobody like has anything else to do, and now it's just like they're like destroying each other now. Yeah, I just think it's interesting, and especially like the anti-corruption, like the showing of the corruption of all the people in the all the people high up is something that is actually fairly present in like a lot of Japanese uh uh like movies or media of like
Mhm.
kind of condemning that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to watch a movie that was made, um, you know, 30 something years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All of the themes that they were running through and like the fears that they have of,
Yeah.
2019, how prevalent they are still today and
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, even with some of the stuff that's like going on right now in the news,
Yeah.
it
Oh,
all
yeah. I
feels like,
know. Exactly.
wow,
Exactly.
30-year-old movie, and we still haven't gotten over the same
Yeah. Yeah.
issues.
Yeah. It's true.
The next question that I want to ask is sort of going back to the idea that like there's a lot of people like me out there who really don't know much about anime, or the stuff that they do know is limited to like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm.
Or like your almost
Yeah,
animes,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
Avatar is almost anime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, if if you were to imagine quarantine isn't happening right now, right?
Yeah.
Imagine I'm back in Brooklyn with you and Justin, and we're gonna have a movie night, and I haven't
Mhm.
seen it yet, and you want to get me to watch Akira, somebody who doesn't watch a lot of anime. What
Hmm.
is your like sales pitch for somebody who
Mm.
doesn't watch a lot of anime and why they might enjoy this one?
Hmm. I mean, so I think that at the very least, like this movie, like as a movie, was because it was like for a lot of people, especially for a lot of people outside of Japan, it was the first look at what like Japanese animation is, like anime is, but also as to like what animation can do in general. So I think that like first of all, I'll be like, okay, like if like how do you feel about like cyberpunk? What do you feel about like yeah, like what do you feel about like futuristic, like grungy futuristic like places
Yeah,
and stuff
like
like
that retro futuristic
that?
stuff that you get. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that this movie also did a lot like for that, and like it like really like for people who like were into that, this was like, oh wow, this is like this is a crazy like, and especially like if like what do you feel about like crazy like stories of like people with like really kind of surreal a surreal story, but like also lots of action, lots
Yeah.
of lots of yeah, lots of action,
Yeah.
lots of weird, like something that's weird. Because that's something that like I like about anime in general is that it's really gives the people who are creating it like the room to be like to just like really think about and talk about some stuff that are like really like that can be really heady and really kind of uh academic or
Yeah.
existential, but kind of put it in a way that's like at the same time still like interesting to take in and to see and to like listen to, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a little spoiler warning,
Mm-hmm.
but this movie, it correct me if I'm wrong, but this movie ends with the creation of another universe.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, something like that. The creation of something large at the very
Yeah.
least. Yeah, it's definitely because like the whole idea of like Akira being like the way that like I think of it is like being like potential energy, like being like the energy of like change is I mean yeah, and like it like it's definitely not like an everyday thing, you know?
No, and they also say like in the movie, like it escalates so quickly.
At the time, at least in Japan, this stuff was like not super groundbreaking.
Mm,
Actually, Akira didn't actually do very well in Japan. It actually didn't make back its budget. It was the
really?
yeah yeah yeah. It was I think it was the most expensive animated movie of its time in Japan. Actually, maybe even in the world. I think it was around eight. I don't know. I won't say like exact numbers. I think it was 8 million. The budget was 8 million.
That's a lot of moolah, especially
Yeah,
for the 1980s.
yeah, yeah. And so it didn't recoup its expenses in Japan, and then it got there was like a company in the U.S. that were like, let's bring it to the U.S. and see how it does, and it ended up blowing up just internationally in general. It made back way, way, way more than like its original expenses just from its outside of Japan revenue. So I think for the people in Japan, because there are a lot of the movies that came out in that year, there are a lot of good like anime movies that like came out. But in outside of the US, people really hadn't seen things like this before. The movie that came out in the US, the Disney movie that came out in the US was I think Oliver and Company, which is a very big contrast if you like look at animated movies between the two.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like people were like, oh, we didn't even know people could like do this using animation. So it was like basically, and that's what people were like, oh well, so what is this anime thing? If they have stuff like this, what else do they have? So like this came out, and then people were like, oh, and then like who's this Hayao Miyazaki person? What is he doing? And then and now we have like what we have today, which is pretty
Yeah.
much kind of built on the back of like these works.
Daniel, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This
Oh,
has
always a
been
pleasure.
a lovely, fascinating conversation. I learned a lot. I don't know how I'm going to hold myself to my new 25-minute cap.
Oh yeah,
I'll have to just cut out some of my own mumblings. I want to also thank everybody else for tuning in and watching this. If you haven't seen Akira already, I thoroughly recommend you give it a try. It's, as I said, it's on Hulu, both subbed and dubbed, whichever you prefer. It's also available for rent on like Amazon and iTunes. That's it for today, everyone. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below about what you thought about the movie. Also, tell us what your favorite animated movie of all time is. Next week, we'll be watching one of the great American movies from the 1980s, a coming-of-age story you might have heard about. It's Stand By Me, one of my personal favorite movies in my top 100. Hits home hard. Daniel, I don't know if you've seen it, but if
no, I have.
It's a wonderful movie.
It is,
young Will Wheaton, a young River Phoenix. So be sure to join us for that next week, everybody. And thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.